There is a hunger you keep misnaming. You feel it late at night, when the world quiets down and your distractions lose their grip. You feel it when your phone is in your hand and your mind drifts toward bodies, faces, fantasies. You feel it in the pull toward attention, validation, touch, desire. You feel it in the restless ache that doesn't go away after pleasure fades. You call it lust. You call it libido. You call it attraction. You call it just being human. But it isn't that simple. You're not horny. You're starving. Starving for something your body learned to ask for when your soul wasn't being fed. Sexual desire is easy to talk about. It's socially acceptable. It's visible. It has an outlet. But the hunger beneath it, that's the one no one teaches you how to name. You think you want bodies, but bodies are symbols. You think you want pleasure, but pleasure is a doorway. You think you want release, but release is temporary. What you want is nourishment, emotional nourishment, psychological nourishment, existential nourishment. You want to feel alive again. Modern culture teaches you to interpret every inner ache as desire, every emptiness as libido, every restlessness as lust. So you chase stimulation instead of asking yourself why you feel hollow in the first place. You scroll, you fantasize, you flirt. You seek attention, you seek novelty, you seek intensity. And for a moment it works. Your nervous system lights up, your body wakes up, you feel something. But afterward, there's the same quiet emptiness, the same ache, the same hunger. Because what you fed wasn't the hunger, it was the symptom. Lust becomes addictive not because sex is powerful, but because it is one of the fastest ways to feel seen, even if only for a moment, to feel wanted, desired, chosen, validated. And when you didn't receive those things consistently, when attention was conditional, when affection was scarce, when love was unpredictable, your psyche learned a shortcut. If I can be desired, I won't feel invisible. That belief settles deep into the unconscious, and from there, it quietly runs your behavior. You don't chase pleasure, you chase confirmation. Confirmation that you matter, confirmation that you exist, confirmation that you're not forgotten, confirmation that you're enough. Sexual hunger often masks emotional famine. This is why desire spikes when you're lonely, why lust intensifies when you feel unseen, why attraction grows strongest when life feels empty, stagnant, or false. Why you crave intensity when meaning is missing. The body speaks in sensations when the soul has no language. You learned early on that wanting connection was dangerous, disappointing, or humiliating, so you learned to want desire instead. Desire is safer than need. Desire feels powerful. Need feels vulnerable. Desire lets you chase. Need forces you to ask. So you trained yourself to eroticize hunger instead of listening to it. And now, when you feel that ache, that pull towards someone, something, anyone, you assume it's sexual. But most of the time it's not. It's the hunger to be mirrored, the hunger to be touched without performing, the hunger to be close without disappearing, the hunger to be wanted without being consumed, the hunger to feel real in a world that keeps you numb. You mistake arousal for aliveness because aliveness has been missing for so long. This is why pleasure alone never satisfies you, why the fantasy is stronger than the act, why the anticipation feels better than the release, why the moment after is often empty. The psyche isn't looking for orgasm, it's looking for meaning. And when meaning is absent, desire tries to replace it. But desire is a terrible substitute for nourishment. You don't want more sex, you want more life, you want depth. If this content making sense to you, subscribe to the channel, and thank you for your support. You want presence. You want to feel rooted in yourself. You want to feel connected to something real, to another human, to your body, to your own truth. But instead of being taught how to cultivate that, you were taught how to consume. Consume bodies, consume attention, consume novelty, consume stimulation, so you stay hungry. And the more you feed the surface desire, the deeper the starvation goes. Because hunger ignored does not disappear. It disguises itself. It turns into compulsive attraction, into endless scrolling, into chasing intensity, into craving validation, into confusing chemistry with connection. You're not horny. You're starving for intimacy. Not intimacy as romance, but intimacy as contact with yourself, with another person, with your own inner world. You crave closeness, but closeness requires presence. Presence requires honesty. Honesty requires slowing down long enough to feel what you've been avoiding. And that's the part you resist. Because if you stopped chasing desire, you'd have to sit with the emptiness underneath it. You'd have to feel the loneliness, the grief, the boredom, the unmet needs, the unlived life. So you keep chasing stimulation because it keeps you moving. But movement is not nourishment. At some point, the psyche demands more. It grows tired of being fed illusions. It starts sending stronger signals, more craving, more restlessness, more dissatisfaction, not to punish you, but to wake you up. Because lust, at its core, is not a sin. It's not a flaw. It's not weakness. It's a messenger. And the sage is simple: something essential is missing from your life. And until you stop mislabeling hunger as desire, you'll keep feeding the wrong thing and wondering why you're never full. There's a reason this hunger feels endless in the modern world. You're surrounded by stimulation, yet starving. Surrounded by bodies, yet untouched. Surrounded by attention, yet unseen. Surrounded by noise, yet profoundly alone. This isn't accidental. Modern culture doesn't teach you how to be nourished. It teaches you how to crave. You're trained to interpret emptiness as opportunity, loneliness as a problem to be solved with bodies, boredom as a sign you need more stimulation, restlessness as proof you're missing out. So desire becomes constant. But constant desire is not vitality. It's depletion. You're not meant to live in a perpetual state of wanting. The psyche wasn't designed for endless arousal without grounding, without meaning, without integration. But the world rewards hunger. It monetizes it. It amplifies it. It sells you the illusion that if you just want harder, chase faster, consume more, you'll finally feel full. And when you don't, it tells you something is wrong with you. So you internalize the blame. You think you're addicted to lust. You think you're weak. You think you lack discipline. You think you're broken. But you're not broken, you're underfed. Underfed in presence, underfed in intimacy, underfed in meaning, underfed in embodiment, underfed in truth. Desire intensifies when life becomes abstract, when your days feel repetitive, when your work feels disconnected from who you are, when your relationships lack depth, when your body becomes an accessory instead of a home, when your emotions are managed instead of felt. The psyche doesn't tolerate emptiness quietly. It looks for energy wherever it can find it, and sexual energy is the most immediate source. It's raw, it's visceral, it bypasses thought. It lights up the nervous system instantly. So when your life lacks vitality, sexual desire steps in as a substitute. Not because you're immoral, but because your system is trying to feel alive. This is why lust spikes during periods of stagnation, why boredom breeds fantasy, why numbness breeds obsession, why comfort breeds craving. You mistake stimulation for fulfillment because fulfillment feels unfamiliar. Real nourishment is slower, quieter, less dramatic. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with grounding, with feeling your body from the inside, with inhabiting your breath, with being present enough to notice what you actually feel, with tolerating silence without needing to fill it. But silence scares you because silence is where the hunger speaks clearly. So you stay loud, you stay stimulated, you stay distracted, and desire keeps knocking, not to tempt you, but to ask a question you keep avoiding. What are you actually missing? Most people never ask this honestly. They chase desire their entire lives, mistaking intensity for depth, consumption for connection, novelty for meaning. And the more they chase, the hungrier they become, because desire without grounding becomes dissociation. You're not present in your body. You're using it. You're not connected to others. You're consuming them. You're not inhabiting your life. You're escaping it. This is why desire often feels empty afterward, why the satisfaction fades quickly, why the hunger returns stronger, because the psyche doesn't want release. It wants relationship with your body, relationship with your emotions, relationship with your inner world, relationship with something that feels real. And this is where things become uncomfortable. Because real nourishment requires you to slow down enough to feel what you've been outrunning. It requires you to sit with your loneliness instead of anesthetizing it, to feel your boredom instead of eroticizing it, to feel your sadness instead of turning it into fantasy, to feel your anger instead of discharging it through desire. If this content making sense to you, subscribe to the channel, and thank you for your support. Most people would rather stay hungry than feel what the hunger is pointing to. So they keep chasing bodies instead of building depth. They keep seeking validation instead of cultivating self-contact. They keep eroticizing absence instead of creating presence. But the psyche keeps score. And eventually, desire stops feeling exciting and starts feeling compulsive. That's the warning sign. When wanting no longer feels joyful but urgent. When attraction no longer feels playful but necessary. When fantasy no longer feels creative but consuming. That's not lust anymore. That's starvation. A nervous system desperate for regulation. A soul desperate for contact. A self desperate to be inhabited. And no amount of stimulation will fix that. Because what you're hungry for cannot be consumed. It must be lived. You don't need more pleasure. You need more presence. You don't need more desire. You need more embodiment. You don't need more attraction. You need more truth. And until you give yourself those things, desire will keep pretending to be the answer. But it's not the answer. It's the signal. There comes a moment when the hunger changes its voice. It stops screaming. Stops pulling you toward screens, bodies, fantasies, distractions. Stops demanding intensity just to feel something. Not because it's gone, but because you've finally turned toward it. This is the moment most people never reach. They keep feeding the surface appetite, never listening to what the hunger is actually asking for. But when you pause long enough, when you let the restlessness settle instead of reacting to it, something unexpected happens. The hunger becomes intelligible. You realize it was never asking for sex. It was asking for contact. Not contact in the social sense. Contact with yourself. To inhabit your body instead of escaping it. To feel your emotions without immediately discharging them. To sit in your own presence without anesthetizing it. To allow aliveness without needing it to be intense. This is where desire transforms. It stops being compulsive and starts becoming directional. It stops pulling you outward and starts guiding you inward. Because sexual energy is not just about pleasure, it is life force, creative force, relational force. When that energy has nowhere meaningful to go, it turns restless, hungry, endlessly dissatisfied. But when it's grounded, in purpose, in embodiment, in truth, in real connection, it becomes generative instead of consuming. This is what no one tells you. You don't outgrow desire. You integrate it. Desire doesn't disappear when you're nourished. It becomes clearer. It becomes less frantic, less desperate, less performative. You stop wanting everyone. You stop needing validation. You stop chasing intensity for its own sake. Because you're no longer empty. You're present. And presence changes everything. You begin to feel the difference between wanting and longing, between arousal and aliveness, between attraction and avoidance, between intimacy and stimulation. You stop confusing chemistry with connection. You stop eroticizing absence. You stop mistaking attention for care, not because you're disciplined, but because you're fed by meaning, fed by depth, fed by inhabiting your life instead of escaping it. And something subtle but powerful happens. Your desire becomes honest. You want fewer things, but you want them more truthfully. You're no longer drawn to bodies that distract you from yourself. You're drawn to people who can meet you where you actually are. You're no longer chasing desire to fill a void. You're allowing desire to arise from fullness. This is the difference between hunger and appetite. Hunger is chaotic. Appetite is selective. Hunger consumes. Appetite chooses. Hunger is urgent. Appetite is grounded. Most people never experience appetite because they never let themselves be nourished. They stay hungry on purpose because hunger feels familiar. But familiarity is not health. Health is what happens when you finally give yourself what you've been substituting. When you slow down enough to feel your body from the inside. When you build a life that actually engages you. When your days contain presence instead of constant escape. When your relationships have depth instead of performance. When your sexuality is an expression of connection, not a coping mechanism for emptiness. This is when desire stops owning you and starts serving you. Not as a compulsion, but as information. It tells you when you're alive. It tells you when you're disconnected. It tells you when something in your life is false. It tells you when something is missing. And instead of reacting, you listen. You ask, what am I actually hungry for right now? Rest, connection, touch, meaning, creativity, movement, truth. You stop assuming the answer is sex and start letting it be honest. This is where power returns. Not dominance, not control, but agency. You're no longer at the mercy of your impulses because you understand them. You're no longer ashamed of desire because you've learned to hear what it's saying. You're no longer chasing stimulation because you're no longer starving. And here's the quiet truth at the center of all of this. When you're nourished, desire becomes beautiful. It becomes playful instead of desperate, intimate instead of performative, present instead of compulsive. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop using bodies to regulate your nervous system. You stop chasing validation through attraction. You become someone who can meet desire instead of being driven by it. And that's when the hunger finally rests. Not because it died, but because it was heard. Because it was understood. Because it was fed with what it actually needed all along. You were never too sexual. Never too much. Never out of control. You were just starving in a world that taught you how to crave, but never how to be nourished. And the moment you learn the difference, everything changes.